Next, we are moving on to a panel. So let's invite some discussion. The panel is going to be on defending the value of the short stay sector in Britain's tourism economy. And joining us, we have this panel chaired by Joss Croft, who's the CEO of UKInbound. We're also being joined by Andy Fenner, our trusty CEO of the STAA. Chris Webb, again, joining us for the panel, MP of Blackpool South and chair of the APPG for Hospitality and Tourism. Kate Nicholls, who is from UKHospitality, and Luke Impett, head of public affairs and partnerships for Northern Europe for Airbnb. So please, everyone come take a seat and let's start a discussion.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see so many people here. As introduced, I'm Joss Croft. I'm Chief Executive of UKInbound. We're a trade association, the only trade association that looks exclusively at those matters impacting inbound tourism into the UK. So our session today is very much around looking beyond the headlines and defending the value of the short-term, the short stay sector in Britain's tourism economy. And it's a really important and timely discussion, I hope, as well, because as Andy mentioned earlier on, I think over the past few years there have been a lot of stories out there, not all of them massively positive, not all of them accurately reflecting what the situation is, and often focusing on areas that we don't necessarily believe are true: housing shortages, local disruption, etc. But the concerns are real, and therefore they need to be addressed, and now's a really good time to do that. But of course, and again, we heard from Chris around the value of tourism. It's growing massively, certainly in terms of the inbound side, growing much, much faster than the wider economy. And we know that rural and coastal tourism accounts for such a huge proportion of that domestic tourism as well. And of course, when people travel, they have to stay somewhere, so accommodation becomes something really important for them. And it's not just a hygiene factor, it's also becoming part of their experience as well. And short stay has a huge role to play within that, enabling visitors to come in maybe in areas where they couldn't otherwise get that availability or that capacity, particularly in times of peak or event-driven business as well. So I'm delighted to be joined this morning on an expert panel that we have here. They've had the introductions. We've got Chris, who a huge champion for the sector. We're grateful for all that you do. Thank you. And also chair of the very important all-party parliamentary group on hospitality and tourism. So great to hear a Westminster view, but also that regional coastal view at the same time. We're also lucky enough to have Kate, another huge champion for the sector, and she really does lead the voice in the wider hospitality sector, and a massively strong advocate. I'm sure you'll have seen her across your TV screens, really promoting the role of tourism and not just hospitality. So again, we're grateful for that as well. Andy, fantastic to have you here, if only for a short amount of time. But again, you've been a real champion for the sector, really raised the profile of the sector, and really focusing on those standards, the regulation, and the sector's wider role in supporting tourism and how tourism supports the sector itself. And finally, delighted to have Luke here, Luke Impett, who's going to bring that valuable insight on the domestic market, the regional spread, and the role of partnerships in terms of driving forward your businesses. So we've got about half an hour. I'm going to start with a few questions, and then hopefully we'll be able to open it up for a wider discussion as well. So let's start off with kind of the policy context as well, Chris, if that's okay with you. So I've always felt challenged by maybe a lack of understanding within government of the role of the wider tourism sector. But if we look specifically at short-term accommodation, how understood do you think its impact is amongst the wider Westminster fraternity?
I don't think it's fully understood as it should be. I think that we've got some fantastic champions, again, from across the House. And I do think now we've got a tourism minister that is being engaging and willing to learn and understand more. But we need more of the stories, but also the concerns that many of the sector have to be fed in. And my plea to all of you today is to feed that into your local MP, feed that in about the challenges, ask to meet with them. We can be your voice as the APPG. We are pushing that forward, and we can do that with the heads of government. But it's always helpful to have more advocates on the House, in the House, on the floor of the Commons, pushing for that and pushing for short stays and understanding the challenges that you're facing right now.
So I think it's often thought, and particularly with the rise of the mayors, in terms of their role within it, but you're suggesting actually that local MPs still have a huge role to play here.
Yeah, I think the mayors is the way this government's moving, and that devolution, I think that's right, because then you can adapt to what suits that area. However, there's still a lot of places like Blackpool that do not have mayors, that are still functioning with MPs and councils, and I would really suggest that as many people can, contact your local MP, inform them, whatever party they are, just let them know the challenges you're facing so they can champion you on the floor and lobby on your behalf. The more MPs we have supporting us, pushing for change and to support the sector, the better.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of the role of the APPG and you as its chair, how does the APPG work with wider Westminster in terms of ensuring that those policies represent the sector best?
So it brings together those MPs who have an interest in the sector and value the sector, and to be that voice. So we can organise campaigns, we can organise debates in the Commons and come together to really ensure that government are listening. And it's one, as I said in my speech, it's one of the most popular APPGs. With the support of UKHospitality as our secretariat, we're able to punch above our weight, without a doubt. And it makes us, be that conduit for you all to feed in the concerns and then to get ministers to listen. And I think that's crucial. And we've had some successes, a lot of frustrations, I'm not going to lie. We keep pushing for that VAT reduction. That's a key objective of the APPG. But I feel in the last 6 to 12 months, we've had more engagement than we had in the first year I was chair. So things are brighter, things are moving forward. We've just got to keep that pressure on.
More to do, some success today, but certainly more to do. Kate, we touched there, Chris just touched there around kind of VAT rates and competitiveness. Tourism it's competitive as a global product or experience. There's massive competition out there. How and what more can we all do as individual business owners to try and get government to understand that competitive nature of tourism?
Well, I think Chris is right. You need to be talking at a very local level. Yes, it's global. Yes, there's a lot of inbound, but there is domestic, and there's also day trips and the sort of local hospitality offer that is so critical to underpinning all of us as we go about our everyday lives. We need to do more to make sure that the government understands the context within which tourism happens and the context within which inward investment and UK investment happens. It doesn't happen without that supportive foundation of hospitality. We don't exist in isolation. So it's about talking to local MPs to put it in the context locally and to make sure that we've all got the same messages. And I think what Chris is saying, and I entirely agree with, many voices, exactly the same message, as many pressure points as we can at a local level, and then rising it up through the APPG to the ministers to make sure that they are all getting the same message across and they understand it. If you look at the sort of current context, the war in Iran is also disrupting global travel, it's disrupting domestic travel, it's disrupting day trips, it's disrupting demand, it will hit the UK economy. We need the ministers and the decision makers to see the links between what's happening on the ground with short-term accommodation, with the hospitality providers, and understand how that feeds through to our ability to compete globally.
And in terms of competing globally, whilst we're talking about that, a part of that is around certain government policies, but also some of it's around upskilling our staff, making sure that we're able to offer that world-class welcome, to be able to convert people who might think about travelling overseas to stay here in the UK, keep that money in the economy. What do we need to do there?
And that's what I hope that the tourism strategy and the visitor economy strategy will look at. Again, it's a case of we've got a lot of the data sitting on our website. We need to make sure that people are using it to lobby on that behalf. It is about demand and supply. Fundamentally, it's price competitiveness, and that comes down to tax, and it comes down to decisions from various governments, multiple governments, about the tax rate that our industry faces. 75% of our profits go back to the exchequer in some form of tax. We have the most high tax on energy in the developed economies. We have the second highest property taxes. We are the second highest national living wage in the world. And that has an impact on the price that we then charge. And that results in us being, I think it's 139th out of 141 countries for global competitiveness. A large proportion of that is tax. The government could look at it and should be looking at it. And the biggest one, obviously, is VAT. We are the only European country that doesn't have a lower rate of VAT to be able to incentivize people to come. On the supply side, labour, if we develop that demand, and VAT would support the businesses, but it would drive demand, it would get that positive growth going, and then we would be creating jobs. It's the saddest thing that I've faced over the last 2 years as chair of UK Hospitality is that first job that Chris spoke so eloquently about is being removed and reduced. We are pricing those jobs that teach people common transferable skills. We're pricing them out of the market. We need to get back to doing that, because if that demand comes, it's okay being a Rolls-Royce in price if you can deliver a Rolls-Royce service. If you're delivering anything less than that, people will go elsewhere.
Be turned away. We know that one of the key government priorities is ensuring that the economic benefit is seen across every community, every person. And that obviously means not just London. Luke, if I could just touch upon the role that you think that the short stay sector has in terms of driving some of that regional benefit.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone in this room is a perfect example of that. I think, you know, tourism powers people's livelihoods. It's really, really powerful in local economies. And I mean, Chris has outlined what it means in terms of jobs for the economy, but I think what you see is it's one of the best sectors at turning demand into jobs quite quickly. And it has a disproportionate impact in local economies. So when you look at rural economies, the amount of jobs that are dependent on tourism goes up to about 15% across Europe. If you look at remote communities, it goes up to about 25%. So it has a disproportionate impact. I think we don't really kind of quantify it in a way that, you know, government tends to measure other sectors by. When we look at tourism and hospitality, it's technically the third largest employer in the UK. Like, it's bigger than the NHS. It delivers enormous amount in terms of tax receipts. And used correctly, that can be used to invest in local economies and make them better places to stay and to live. So I think it has an outsized importance when you look at kind of local and regional economies, particularly coastal communities like Blackpool. And we really need to kind of champion that and make sure that people understand that when we're looking at ways in which to deal with policy, to kind of deal with investment and proper provision for the sector.
Yeah, fantastic. Andy, for you, I mean, you mentioned in your opening remarks just a minute ago in terms of, you know, how almost, if you like, how the wider sector is reliant in many degrees upon the short stay sector. But the opposite's also the truth, or the converse is also the truth, isn't it? That the short stay sector is very reliant upon the cultural institutions, the food and beverage, the experience economy that we have as well. How do you see the relationships between the two?
Yeah, I think that's perhaps one of the real benefits of our part of tourism. When you go and stay in, if I went to, let's say Blackpool, I don't know why that place comes to mind, but if I think of Blackpool and I go and stay in a hotel, I'm paying for my overnight stay, but my breakfast is in the hotel thing, which has been bought centrally. My dinner is in there, which has been bought centrally. If I stay in a short-term let, then they don't have breakfast, they don't have dinner. I'm walking down the road to the local shop. I'm going to the local cafe. I'm putting money back into that local economy. And that's where our sector needs, we need to shout about that benefit more. You look on to any of the search sites, Airbnb, Sykes, anybody else. One of the things you look at is there a pub in the village? Is there a restaurant in the village? You know, we aren't an island in tourism. We aren't an island in STAA tourism. We've got to think more of how we as a sector work with Kate, work with UK Hospitality. The APPG is tourism and hospitality because we are intrinsically linked. You don't go on holiday, well, you may do, but most people don't go on holiday to somewhere and think, I don't want a pub. I want to make it really difficult to go to the shop. I don't want any facilities. Who does that? Maybe we do every now and then. But as a general rule, you want that hospitality, tourism. We are peas in a pod, and we've got to work together because what's good for one is good for the other.
It's a fragile ecosystem, and your members, Joss, when they are selling the UK, it is also about heritage and culture, but it is fundamentally, when we look at it, and the latest Visit Britain stats show, it's about eating and drinking and socialising like a local. It's about our music, it's about our entertainment, it's about living the life of somebody who lives in that city or that town or that rural community. We can't exist without the other, and that's what we need to do to make government understand how the dots join up, because supporting one sector or penalising one sector has a knock-on effect across the wider holistic community.
I think that's absolutely right. As I say, I'm nominally responsible in terms of inbound tourism into the UK, and people are often asking me, why do I have an interest in domestic tourism? And it's absolutely because my visitors, when they come to the UK, if there isn't a strong domestic market that supports that product and experiences, then what they're coming for isn't going to be deliverable as well. So we have a huge interest. I actually have huge interest in outbound, funnily enough, as well, because we use the same kit, the same airports, the same bits of metal as well. I think we're going to move on and talk a little bit around kind of regional changes that we're seeing with the growth of the mayors. And obviously, one of the potential introductions that we're likely to see is a overnight visitor levy. We'll come on and talk about that in a minute. But at the moment, it's just not possible to introduce a levy in England because we just don't know about what stock is out there. So in terms of a statutory registration scheme, we obviously have one up in Scotland as well. But what do you think good regulation might look like, Chris, in terms of an English answer to that?
Since I got the ring, I've been thinking about this, and I worry that we're asking too much of a sector at the time when it's struggling. I understand the idea of a registration scheme. I understand trying to bring up the quality, and unfortunately in Blackpool, whilst we've got fantastic short stay accommodation, fantastic hotels and beds, we have got some of the worst as well. Yeah. You know, those £20 a night, £30 a night beds still exist in Blackpool. So we do need to look at the standard, and we do need to make sure that it's right and it works for the town. But for me, we've got to make sure we bring in a scheme that is easy for that small business that might be running as a family can understand, as well as the bigger ones. And that's my concern with it at the minute. I understand why. I'm not quite there yet with the implementation, because I just think it may just be too much of a burden for those already working 60, 70, 80 hours a week to keep the business afloat at a time that's troubling. And with this year as well, with Iran, and hopefully that does what it did after COVID, and we have more inbound and more people in domestic tourism. But yeah, I think we've just got to make it sure it's a system that's as simple as possible. Yeah. And I worry sometimes government systems aren't. And they're designed by people who have no real idea about the sector and think they do because they've gone on a holiday. Yeah. So again, for me, and what I've been feeding through, is it has to be co-designed with the sector, with those involved, so then it is as easy as possible. Yeah. Yeah.
So something around that co-creation, I think you're right. I mean, if you look, we are micro businesses. We're not even small and medium enterprises. So much of our sector is micro businesses. And we see this, you can offer many things, but actually bringing that horse to water is really difficult if they're making the breakfast, if they're making the beds, if they're doing the changeovers as well.
Yeah, and it's just to link it to the kind of the jobs as well, where many, again, I use Blackpool as the example, they would bring in part-time or more younger people to help fill those gaps in peak. That's becoming less and less because of choices that the government's made. We aren't incentivising business to have that anymore and giving support. And I think that's created more of a burden. So more of the owners and you're having to do more with less. And this is just adding more to that. And I worry at this time.
Yeah. And just in terms of the domestic sector, we saw after the pandemic, obviously, because people couldn't travel internationally, we saw massive importance of domestic. Obviously, there's challenges more so on the supply side around the Iran conflict. Luke, are you seeing, what are your partners telling you about the impacts of the conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East?
So I think the first thing to say is, so domestic has an outsized importance for the UK economy in terms of travel. I think 4 out of every 5 nights spent in the UK is through domestic travel. I think on Airbnb, we index very, very heavily on domestic, so it does a lot of the heavy lift. And as I said before, it has an outsized proportion, particularly in kind of local and regional economies. I think, yes, we're seeing changes to international travel as a result of the conflict in the Middle East, but the thing I would say is demand is pretty resilient. It always has been in travel. It's one of the last things people choose to cut back on. The difference is that it will funnel itself in different ways depending on how people can choose to travel. I think that the challenge we have is that international travel is, of course, high volume, high spend. We shouldn't forget that the lion's share of it will go to places like London. But of course, that means that it puts more onus on domestic as we're marketing the UK for those that are already living and working here to travel with their families. So I think we can conclude that it's incredibly valuable. It will change over time. It's obviously always going to be slightly more volatile than domestic. But ultimately, domestic is doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah. And Kate, from your side, my own experience of what's happening in the Middle East is very much around that the demand is still there. It's just shifting where it's going. And that does present huge opportunities for the United Kingdom, some of those nearer European markets as well. On the supply side, Kate, what are you hearing from your members in terms of challenges coming off at the back of Iran's situation?
Well, it's undoubtedly going to be a challenging situation, a very promising move towards extending the ceasefire last night. However, even if the war stopped now and the straits reopened fully and oil began to flow, you are building in inflationary pressures in the economy for the next 6 to 9 months, and you're also building in challenges around demand. I appreciate that's more inbound travel, but uniquely, tourism and hospitality is facing a supply and a demand side challenge simultaneously, and I don't think that's properly factored into everybody's thinking. So we're seeing immediate hits from a business perspective on fuel. Heating oil, those prices went through. 40% of hospitality and tourism businesses renew their energy contracts in the next 6 months, so that will also have an impact. And at the same time, we know that there are pressures coming down the food supply chain. It might seem remote when you're talking about fertilizer, chemicals, plastics, but that will build as you feel that pressure coming through. So today's inflation figures only capture, so it went up from 3 to 3.4%, I think, or it might be 3.3. But it went up, but that's only the first 3 weeks of March. So those pressures will start to build. That impacts clearly on cost of living pressures that consumers are feeling. And what we're seeing then across the demand side is that you've got a big chunk of our international market that can't travel and real confidence issues in the domestic market who are uncertain about what happens with fuel. Are there challenges that means that they're hesitant to book and they are delaying booking, and that's why I think you need a different kind of response from the government. That's why if I was in that situation, it's much more like you had with Gordon Brown in the financial crisis. A VAT cut would stimulate demand, get the economy moving, and give consumers the confidence that they can go out and spend and make those bookings now. Then domestic can do the heavy lifting. But without that, we're all going to face higher inflationary pressures.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We touched upon it earlier on. Andy, I'm keen to hear from you around kind of tourism visitor levies. You mentioned, I think you're shortly off to go to Amsterdam. Amsterdam, I think, has got what's widely recognized as the highest tourism tax in the world. Are there any good examples of a tourism tax that you could draw upon?
How many people in the world, you ask, is there an example of a good tax? I think when you look at, the EU did a survey, I think it was 2017, where they looked at the impact of tourism tax on the individual cities that it's brought in on, and it didn't have any impact on visitor numbers. And I think what we're looking at in the UK is where we can, the government or HMT, the Treasury, can look at something like that and think, okay, well, we can bring in tourism tax. The problem for our sector, as Kate very much brings to the fore in her taxed out campaigns and everything else, is that it's not just tourism tax that we're looking at. We have got EPCs, we've got FHL, we've got all of these other things that are hitting our sector. I also know from traveling to Amsterdam, having family in South Africa, that tourism in this country is also incredibly expensive. We have got one of the hardest visa schemes to get. My South African family, if they want to come and visit me, they can get a Schengen visa, they can go to Amsterdam, they can go to Paris, they can go to Rome, they can go all over Europe. or you pay more money, have a more difficult process, and you can just come to the UK. So we've got to change this, and we've got to recognize where it seems very distant to us. If I was a host in Wales of my own holiday lets, the issues with visas and everything else, they seem a world away, but they're not. They impact us. It's the number of people coming into this country as a whole. Inbound tourism affects us as holiday let owners as much as it affects any hotel or anybody else. We are, in our sector, the modern face of UK tourism. We've got that place now. And we've got to get out there and start getting our voices to back up what Kate's doing, talk about what Chris is doing, and say, look, we need to get tax-free for tourists back. It brings people in. We've got to get our visa scheme easier. It brings people in. You were talking yesterday about how difficult it is at the border. I mean, I travel to Amsterdam all the time now. I'm lucky I don't have to use these ETS screens, but the queues at Schiphol of people coming and trying to get into the UK, and you look at it, and people like my family in South Africa just think, I'm just not going to bother. We just won't go to the UK. It's too expensive, it's too much aggro, and we've got to get back on this.
Can I just say, though, 4 out of 5 bed nights in the UK are domestic. So yes, we might choose to still bear the tax if we're going to Venice or Spain, and we don't think of it as being a big deterrent for us, or going abroad or inbound travel wherever. That EU study that was done then and has been updated since did show that it impacted dwell time spend in the wider economy, because if you're paying £5 a night for families, you're not going to spend £5 on a cup of coffee. But it also impacted and it displaced within the country. But let's not forget, we're taxing ourselves. When we all come from our homes to stay at an event or to go to a conference, or builders go to work, or MPs stay in Westminster and come down to Westminster. It impacts all of us, and we need to understand that in the context of being the most highly taxed sector of the economy, the most highly taxed in the OECD, as an industry, this is a tax that we don't need. It's the wrong time, it's the wrong tax, and certainly with the war in Iran and the inflationary pressures, nobody should be thinking about additional taxes on this sector of the economy at this point.
I think certainly my members would echo that whilst the numbers are still good, numbers are still coming into the country. We're very successful. We're the 7th most visited country in the world. The problem is that money is being taken out of their pockets and not going into attractions. So some of my paid-for attractions would say people are doing free attractions, or they might be doing 1 paid for and 1 free instead of 2 paid for. So it's definitely taking money out, and I think we are seeing a reduction in length of stay. But you're right. I'm not sure everyone recognises that tourism taxes are paid by domestic, but by us Brits, by us locals indeed as well.
Tourism implies sort of other or an outsider. It's a holiday tax. It's a tax on the Great British Holiday. And if I go across the Pennines from the beautiful North Yorkshire coast to the fantastic Lancashire coast in Blackpool, I would be paying for that. And that would mean that my bed was more expensive to see the illuminations. I might go and stay and see the illuminations. I probably wouldn't spend money in the pub or the local bar or the local economy. And we have a finite pool, but it is coming from domestic consumers, and it is impacting cost of living.
Just on that, a big concern for me as well is that whilst we're seeing some cities across the UK having this already, all got different schemes. So how do you as a business, and if you've got multiple in arrears, how do you manage that? And I get that because my wife's in the sector, she does the accounts for many of the hotels, all in these different areas, and it is a nightmare, and it is extra burden on employers. So again, my call to the government is, it's probably not wise at this time. If you are moving forward with it, and we can't stop you, you've got to look at a simple scheme that doesn't, that is uniform across the country, and that this money is used to advertise and support hospitality and tourism in the area, and make sure it stays within that, because otherwise, we know local councils, mayors will cough it up, and it will be spent on other bits and other areas on their budgets, and to me, that's not right. If this is created by the sector and for those visiting and tourism, it needs to be spent back in that. So, from my approach is, we're trying to say, similar with Kate, wrong tax, wrong time, but if it is, we've got to make sure that we're not another burden.
Yeah. Andy, a good example of an international tourism tax. I'll give you one. Interlaken in Switzerland. You go to Interlaken, you arrive at your hotel. You do pay €5 per night, so not insubstantial. You then get a free travel pass that allows you to travel around local buses free of charge all around Interlaken with your bicycles. Locals are able to use those vehicles free of charge as well, so there's a benefit for the customer, there's a benefit for the locality, there's a benefit for residents. It's easy to collect, job done. So there are examples out there, and I think, Kate, yeah.
But crucially, Interlaken, lower rate of VAT, lower rate of employers' NIC, lower rate of business tax, lower cost of energy. It's cumulative. It's
That's
cumulative.
Right. It's not just one thing. It's the whole succession across that customer journey, isn't it, Chris? So if we want, if the government, as its stated aim, is driving that economic benefit across the whole of the country, what role do you think short-term accommodation has to play within that strategy of regional growth?
It's great for me. If I look at my region, it's creating more. We know if we can convince people to stay over in Blackpool and stay overnight in Lancashire, that puts more money in the economy. We've got to work with short-term lets. We've got to work with those offering those overnights to convince local, UK inbound and outbound to stay longer and even to stay overnight. We've got a huge challenge of this in Blackpool. So to us, that is about reducing rates, reducing VAT, that you're able to offer those and convince that consumer to stay longer or even stay overnight. But we've got to support as well. We've got to make sure we're putting money in advertising, make sure people can see that tourism offer in the area. So they go, oh, well, there is enough to do 2, 3 days, 4 days. Because that has changed. We're trying that now in Blackpool. We're bringing all the attractions together under one resort pass. When in the past egos have got in the way in different businesses, now we all know it's a one Blackpool approach and it's working. But again, with Visit England support and with Visit Blackpool, putting that money into that advertising as well is crucial and showing the wide range of offers that our areas, our resorts, our seaside towns, our rural communities, our big cities have that visitors can come and use when they come for tourism. It's that support that can then generate the growth, but we've got to, we can't do that as a government. All we can do is get off your back, get out the way, and support you to deliver that.
And we've seen in Blackpool, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you do look out some of the massive regeneration that's going on in Blackpool. And again, I'm going to give a quick shout out, Kate, to your Oxford economic study on the impact of tourism taxes as well. So again, look on the UK Hospitality site. I'm keen to open this up to the audience in the few remaining minutes that we've got left. So have we got any questions for the panel? Does anyone have anything to say? I see a few familiar faces out there who are not normally short of saying something, so feel free to jump in. Okay, I can't see any at the moment. So I guess, we've got about just under 3 minutes left, but if there's one thing or one key insight or action that people should be taking away from the conversation that we've had today, I want to ask each of the panelists, what's that key insight, that key nugget that people can take back to think about and to action? Andy, I'll start with you.
For the hosts and property managers in the room, is to be positive and proud of their businesses. Be proud of what you're doing. Don't let anybody tell you that what you do as tourism is not a good thing for your communities, because it is. And be proud of what your businesses are achieving.
Fantastic. Luke?
I would say that demand is incredibly resilient for travel. It is always going to be there, but we are grappling with some very difficult challenges on affordability at the moment. It's essential that government really recognizes and joins the dots between how people decide where to go, where they book, where they stay, and how much it's going to cost them, and we need to keep that environment as competitive as possible.
Fantastic. Kate?
I think my message would be to one voice and make sure that we are all using our voice to say the same thing to government and to politicians, locally, nationally, regionally. There is a DCMS select committee coming up looking at tourism. If you're going to get cut through, you need to have one clear message that everybody is behind. So greater collaboration, greater working with industry bodies, whichever one you're a member of, and making sure that we have that consolidation so that we have one voice for tourism.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that, but I'll just say something different. the demand for short stay, and I'm seeing this on my doorstep, is increasing rapidly in places like Blackpool. More and more families, when they're coming to seaside resorts and for the holidays, want that short stay rather than the hotels. So I think, look at that, there is demand, work with it, exactly what Andy said, be proud of what you're delivering, and know that us here as the APPG have got your back, feeding information, any concerns, we're here to help.
Thank you very much. I think I've got about 40 seconds, so just kind of wrapping up quickly a few thoughts of mine that I've heard today. It's around single message and many voices, something around collaboration and partnerships within that as well. Competitiveness, and that's competitiveness of welcome as well as competitive of tax as well. The integrated nature of the sector, linking back to those partnerships and those collaborations as well, that there is demand out there. This is a fantastic sector, and that we need to be telling and shouting about it a bit more as well. So please put your hands together for our fabulous panel. Andy, Luke, Kate, and Chris. Apologies. Thank you.